All right, we are live. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I know it's a weird time, but there's so much to discuss. We figured let's go ahead and just do this Thursday morning before everyone's off and running. Den is here. So if you have questions or comments, leave them and we will get to as many as we can. As always, go to patreon.com/Hemant if you want to support the work I'm doing. And if you want to just subscribe to the newsletter for free, you can do that right over there. Okay, let's get started. We're going to start by talking about what's happening in Iowa right now because they're gearing up for the holiday season. And you may recall that a couple of years ago, there was a lot of controversy in the Iowa state capitol because they have one of those open forums where if you file the paperwork, you can have a holiday display in the Capitol. And usually you see nativity scenes, but a couple of years ago, there was the Satanic Temple of Iowa, and they put up a statue of Baphomet, and all the right people flipped out as if the world had ended. Specifically, I will show you this right here. This is a newspaper article or a local news article from 2023. This is the display, by the way. The Satanic Altar. It's just candles. It's a Baphomet statue with like red roses or something. Iowa governor calls satanic display inside Capitol building absolutely objectionable. Oh my God, it's the worst thing to ever happen in Iowa. Here's a better picture of that display, right? Look at how cute it is. Come on. What's wrong with that? There's nothing objectionable about it. But as you may also recall, not long after that went up, someone vandalized that display. They attempted to throw Baphomet into the trash. The statue was beyond repair, but the altar still stands. What else happened? The guy who did it, the guy who vandalized it, he was charged with a hate crime. He was a former military dude, I believe, but he's a Christian nationalist. He's a Christian zealot. Maybe not a military guy, but he was a former like elected official somewhere. But he vandalized this display and he was later charged with that hate crime. He eventually pleaded guilty to a lesser charge so he could avoid the felony charges. But that's what happened 2 years ago, 2023. All these people flipped out. The governor was saying this is horrible. It shouldn't be there. Someone took the cue and vandalized that whole thing, and it became a whole ordeal. And yet, in the 2 years since, it's been the Satanists who have gotten punished for what the vandal did and what the governor didn't like. In fact, I want to show you this. This was a bill that was promoted the following year, and it was literally designed to stop Satanists. Look at this thing right here. This is a bill that was filed. Look at number 1. The state or any political subdivision of the state shall not recognize organizations or individuals who refer to Satan as a deity, worship Satan, or who reference Satan or Satanism as part of the organization or individual's religious practice as an establishment of religion. It's a very weirdly worded thing because you know what religion references Satan? That would be Christianity. But the whole point of this bill was number 2, displays, symbols, or the practice of satanic worship shall not be allowed on public property, in public schools, on property owned by public schools, or on any property owned by the state. And the whole point of that, again, was to block the Satanic Temple from putting up a display in the state capitol. And they were trying to do it without actually saying, we're just doing this to pick on one group in particular. That bill didn't go anywhere because it would have been a First Amendment violation, obviously. But this is the point. Administration officials, the Republicans in Iowa, they have been trying to find whatever ways they could to block Satanist displays in the Capitol. Now, if that bill didn't go anywhere, then why were they blocked from putting up a holiday display last year? Because that's what happened in 2024, a year after that whole controversy. The Satanists said, we would like to make another display in your Capitol, and it didn't work. And the reason has to do with this right here. Basically, They passed a new rule. The what is this? The Iowa Department of Administrative Services, basically the Iowa group that runs what happens in the Capitol building. They passed an updated set of rules, and I want to point out two things in particular. Look at number 2. They said an event may not exceed 1 day, and an event requester may not hold more than one event per calendar year. And maybe you think, okay, so maybe the Satanists can just spend 1 day putting up their statue in the state capitol. No, the reason they passed this particular rule change is because the Satanists wanted to hold, in response to a government-sponsored like Bible reading in the Capitol, they said, we want to do a 4-day straight reading of John Milton's Paradise Lost. And after they file that paperwork to do that inside the Capitol building sometime in the spring or summer, the state said, oh, I'm sorry, we have new rules. You can only have the Capitol for 1 day. And by the way, if you do this, you're blocked out for the rest of the year. And so there was one other thing that I wanted to show you, which is on this list, number 5. Check this out. Just in case the Satanists found a way around it, they also made this rule change, which said nothing that's in the Capitol building can be obscene. And if it's not suitable material for minors, the state can just step in and say this is not allowed. Now, that would not apply to the Satanists because you saw that Baphomet display. What part of that is obscene? Nothing. What part of that is unsuitable for children? Nothing. But this grants the state leeway to basically say anything we don't like. We're going to remove it for the kids. So this is the way they tried getting around it last year. And in fact, there was a different group, the Iowa Atheists and Freethinkers. They wanted to put up their display in the Capitol in 2024. But again, their application was rejected because they held a lobbying day in the Iowa Capitol in January. So these rules prevented a totally different group from using the Capitol during the holiday season. So anyway, what happened after they passed the rule change? The Satanic Temple said, we're still going to read Paradise Lost, but okay, we'll do it at a different building because we still want to have access to the Capitol in December. But when December came around, they were shut out anyway. And this is what happened a year ago. All right. This is the headline. Look at the date here. December 16th, 2024. State officials cancel Iowa Satanic Temple celebration, claiming it's harmful to minors without stating why. And I want to show you 2 quotations here. After careful consideration of the administrative rule and DAS policy, and that's the one I just showed you, I determined the totality of the event request to include elements that are harmful to minors. And therefore, I denied the request. Who said that? That was the director. That was the director of the Iowa Department of Administrative Services, Adam Steen. Steen did not specify what the objectionable elements were or how they could be harmful to minors. Because, of course, he's lying because he's a conservative Christian. That's what they do. And then what else do we got? Governor Kim Reynolds. She issued a statement about this cancellation. The Iowa State Capitol Complex is a place that is open to the public, where children and families routinely visit. Honestly, no, they don't, but okay. Because of this, the state's event policy takes into consideration conduct that would be harmful to minors. This satanic event, which specifically targets children, is harmful to minors, and so it was denied. Again, there was no explanation of how the holiday celebration would be harmful. So you get what happened here. The Satanists said, we just want to put up a totally fine display. And the state officials, the Republicans, said, no, got to protect the kids. We're not allowing it to happen. Utterly insane that they did that. And the way the Satanists responded to this is they publicly said the following. This is again from last December. We're saddened to announce that our event at the Iowa State Capitol has been forcibly canceled by the Iowa DAS. We've made every effort to work with them to ensure a successful event, but after over 2 months on the calendar, we've been informed that our event will no longer be allowed. At the very end of that, hail Satan, hail Iowa. Okay, so what do you do if you're the Satanists at this point? Because this is clearly religious discrimination. The conservative Republicans are just like, we don't want the Satanists in the Capitol building, but we can't just say we're discriminating against religion, so we'll say we're protecting kids. And when reporters are asking, well, what's offensive to kids here? They're like, haha, I can't hear you, bye-bye. So, I mean, it's clear what's going on, right? So after all this happened, as you might suspect, there were suggestions that the Satanists should file a lawsuit. And this is an article from like a week after everything I just shared with you. Satanic Temple of Iowa plans to file a lawsuit after holiday event canceled. There wasn't much to that story. They just said, listen, it's almost Christmas. We're busy. And plus, for the legal battle to finish within the span of like a week, it's not going to happen. So we're just going to take the L for now, and we will consider filing a lawsuit after the Christmas holidays. But guess what? The Satanists never sued. I'm not exactly sure why they didn't, but they ended up not doing it at all, which that's interesting. I'm not sure why they chose not to do it. They have lawyers, but they just chose not to do it. But in the summer of last year, the ACLU of Iowa, they did do one thing. They filed a civil rights complaint with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission. And this is the memo they filed. And look at what they say in the complaint. Again, this is the ACLU working on behalf of the Satanists. Director Steen did not explain whether or what in the song list, make and take ornaments, coloring pages, costume contest, or ritual was determined to be obscene material or gratuitous violence or gore. Basically, we have not been told which of the rules we violated. We had endeavored at the outset to make clear that this was a family-friendly event and that there was no obscenity, gratuitous violence, or gore. So they lodged this complaint with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission. And guess what? They still haven't heard back. There's no resolution on that thing, and there's no lawsuit that's been filed. Just keep that in the back of your head. So that brings us to what's happening now, because you have enough of the backstory. So the question now is, well, if the Satanists have followed all the rules, they haven't held any events in the Capitol this year, that means they should have at least one day in the Capitol available to them to host whatever event they want to do, provided that it's family friendly and there's nothing obscene. And is the state going to allow it this year, or are they going to push back again? Honestly, if they just allowed it to happen and didn't say anything, there would probably be no controversy and no one would even know this is happening, to be honest. But I think you know how this ends, because it's always the same, because Republicans are always fighting imaginary boogeymen in their heads. So here's what's happening now. This is a headline that just appeared this week. This is from Iowa Public Radio. State again denies Satanic Temple's request to hold event at Iowa Capitol building. You can see the date line here. This is November 24th, 2025. And here is Adam Steen, the same guy from last year. He's holding a big-ass publicity stunt event with children in the background. See if you could zoom in here. What does that say? Stand with Steen. Stand for children. But again, I go back to, what are you trying to protect kids from exactly? Because, you could easily make a case that the story of Christianity, which says, believe what we believe or you're going to be tortured in hell for all eternity, that is way worse to tell children than Satan loves you. Follow the 7 fundamental tenets of the Satanic Temple, and all will be well. I want to show you a little of this press conference. The first video I'm going to show you, the audio quality is not great, but here is part of what Steen said, and then we'll talk about it.
This is a tipping point. One of the most divisive issues in the state over the last couple years, and the attempts of the so-called Satanic Church has been denied yet again. No more marketing to children. No more trying to get them to create satanic symbols, sing satanic hymns, partake in satanic rituals. No more having youth involved in costume contests that depict weapons used to abuse youth. This is not religious expression. It's not free speech. It is evil. The reasons I denied this event last year are the same reasons it was denied this year. That's also why I'm the only candidate being sued by the Satanists as I speak. We did it. We stood up. We got the denial that we wanted. And I'm proud to say that good, again, has defeated evil. Denying this event will protect our children. Our children deserve that. Thank you. God bless you. God bless the great state of Iowa.
That is such a weird press conference for a weird guy. By the way, the reason he's doing that is because Adam Steen is now running in the Republican primary to become governor of Iowa. So he's trying to take a stand. And you know how Republicans always play this game when they're trying to pretend like, well, I stand up for children. Oh, really? Do you want to release the Epstein files? What Epstein files? I love kids. And that's why I want to protect them from things that will not affect them whatsoever. But I'm for guns in schools. And if a predator is my party's leader, who the hell cares? Like, that's how Republicans work these days. Did you hear what he said in there? I am the only candidate being sued by the Satanists. No, he's not. That's a lie. He's not being sued by the Satanists. I dare any reporter in Iowa to ask him, hey, give us a copy of the lawsuit. Because it doesn't exist, because Adam Steen is a liar. I just told you, the Satanic Temple hasn't sued him or the state over being denied, even though I would argue they have a pretty good case for it. Anyway, after he was done holding that press conference with a lot of rando kids in the background, he was asked by a reporter, and kudos to the reporter for asking this, what is so offensive about the proposed satanic display or whatever event they wanted to hold? What did Steen mention? No more creating satanic symbols, singing satanic hymns, partaking in satanic rituals. What do you think they are doing? They're coloring pictures. They're singing songs that are like, Satan loves you. Whatever. Who cares? What satanic rituals do you think are happening? Do you think they want to, like, I don't know, burn a goat alive in the middle of the Capitol? I don't know. None of that's happening because these people just make shit up. They're Republicans. That's what they do. But someone did ask him, what is so offensive about the display? I want to show you his response. This video is a little better, but the audio is not as good.
What is specifically harmful to minors? You're talking about the costumes? Yeah. Or what? I mean, what about like kids dressing up as G.I. Joe and carrying toy guns?
Any content that goes towards the soul of children and that fights against the good that are inside of children is evil and needs to be flushed out. Anything that rips away hope from children, anything that raises up the satanic name is evil for children. And I will always fight for children to keep that out of their way.
Yeah. What other religious beliefs would be harmful to expose to children?
Anything that is not God first.
I don't know if you heard all that, so let me repeat some of that. He said he did not explain what about the satanic celebration was offensive because he doesn't have an answer to that because he's making everything up. He also said he's against any content that goes towards the soul of children and that fights against the good that are inside of children. All of that is evil and needs to be flushed out, but he cannot tell anybody what exactly is harmful to children in the display because he doesn't actually care. And then the reporter asked, are there other religious beliefs that might be harmful to children? Since you're already saying Satanism, the way the Satanic Temple is practicing it, you're saying that's offensive. I mean, I think the reporter meant to say, like, so is Islam also evil? Because you would think a conservative Christian would believe that. Are there minor religions that you think are evil? And he said anything that is not God first is harmful to children. So basically, atheists, you are not welcome anywhere in this space. You're not allowed to have any promotion of your stuff. It's not about the kids, apparently. There is nothing about the kids in his answer. He's just saying if it's not God first, it is by definition harmful to children. I mean, if I am a lawyer for the Satanic Temple or the ACLU of Iowa, I am salivating at those words because I'm quoting that shit directly in the lawsuit that I'm going to file soon. Because that's just admitting religious discrimination right there. I don't know. It's very clear he's just doing this for the vibes to win over a Republican electorate. For what it's worth, in that primary election to become the governor of Iowa, he's currently losing by a lot to a current Republican congressman named Randy Feenstra. And in that press conference, one of the things Adam Steen said is, "Hey, Randy, why don't you say what I'm saying? Or are you a coward?" I'm paraphrasing. There is another candidate in the race named Brad Sherman, and he released a statement on Facebook this week. Check this out. This kind of made me laugh. Brad Sherman for Iowa governor. And this is his response to the press conference. He said, "I'm very glad that the Satanic Temple's request was denied. And I am glad that Adam Steen is now taking a strong stand against the normalization and advancement of Satanism." By the way, none of these goobers can define what Satanism is, because obviously the Satanic Temple does not actually believe in a literal Satan. You're thinking about Christians. Anyway, but now he's got to stick it to the guy who's trying to one-up him on being conservative. But yesterday's press conference by Adam Steen was, in my opinion, political grandstanding, attempting to control the narrative and distract from his previous mistake. What mistake? Well, in 2023, I told you the Satanic Temple did have a display in the Capitol that was later vandalized. Who approved that display? Adam Steen. Why? Because denying it would have been religious discrimination, so he had to allow it. But somehow, when he decided he was going to run for governor, he decided, the law doesn't matter. Who cares about the First Amendment? I'm going to fight this. So Brad Sherman's now trying to get him on that. Who allowed it in the first place? I never would have allowed it. I hate the First Amendment, says Brad Sherman. And then there's also this at the bottom. I think Adam is a pretty good guy, but his lack of clarity and his shifting positions on this and other issues indicate that he is not ready to be the governor of Iowa. Whatever. His lack of clarity and his shifting positions, the thing they are talking about is, hey, this other Republican has decided the First Amendment doesn't matter, but he's late to it. I was way ahead of you. I was ignoring the Establishment Clause long before you children ever did. That is Brad Sherman's position on all of this. In case you're wondering, I did get a statement from the Satanic Temple's lawyer. And basically, this is Matt Kazaya. This is what he said. Once state officials open the Capitol to public events, as it has for displays and events around the holidays, they cannot legally exclude the Satanic Temple because it's disfavored or a minority viewpoint. The state should not compound the significant harm its officials have already caused by doubling down on illegal and unconstitutional discrimination. And then, what about the lawsuit is the question. He said, "We are awaiting a decision by the Iowa Office of Civil Rights. We have since supplemented the complaint with various admissions that Adam Steen has made to the press, which confirm the unlawful and unconstitutional efforts to suppress the viewpoint of our client." So they're basically saying, hey, we're quoting everything this guy says. It's blatant religious discrimination. But I don't know if they're just waiting for a response that may not come from the Iowa government, or they're just going to go ahead and file a lawsuit. I am imploring them to file this lawsuit because this is insane what's going on. And I'll share with you one last thing here. This is directly from the Satanic Temple, Iowa, which is the only thing they've said besides that statement really is they did this. Save the date, December 14th, Des Moines, which is where the Capitol is. And they haven't announced what they're going to do on December 14th. Just save the date. Something's going down on that date. Are they going to stage a protest at the Capitol? Are they going to put up a display despite not being able to do so? I don't know. But December 14th, that's the date they want their people to know about. It is weird to me that a proposed satanic display is now at the center of the GOP primary Granted, it's Iowa. I know it's not the most exciting place in the world, but it still feels like a very low priority issue. If you're a farmer in Iowa, why do you care about this? If you're a Republican voter in Iowa, why is this the issue that gets you going? I don't know. And why are all the Republican candidates saying, I hate the First Amendment more than these other candidates do? Like, I would think that should upset the pro America crowd. But again, the right wing version of what America stands for doesn't involve the Constitution. As we've learned from Donald Trump, conservatives do not care if their people are avoiding the law, right? I mean, this just tells you what conservatives think about religious freedom. They think religious freedom is only reserved for people like them, good Christians, and screw the other minorities. Like, the second any non-Christian group wants access to the same public space that Christians have enjoyed access to for generations, all of their rhetoric about religious freedom just collapses entirely. And they're using children's safety as the excuse to censor non-Christian groups. I mean, that's why I appreciate that the Satanic Temple Iowa is at least trying to fight back here, or at least trying to push the right buttons, right? Their presence forces government officials to confront how seriously they take religious freedom at all. And, do they just want to push a Christian nationalist agenda? And the Satanists are exposing a very clear double standard by these Iowa Republicans. And they're pointing out that the rules only change when Christians feel inconvenienced. And these displays are only obscene, apparently, when they're not promoting Jesus. And harm to children only counts when we're talking about imaginary demons. Not when, an actual Christian zealot vandalizes a display on public property in broad daylight. That apparently is fine. So I don't know why the state hasn't responded to the civil rights complaint. I don't know if a lawsuit's going to be filed. But at this point, it sure as hell seems warranted to file a lawsuit, because the Republicans in charge and the ones who want to be in charge have made it clear they do not care about respecting religious freedom. And if the state has decided one religion is good, or belief in God is good, and everything else is evil, we are heading down a very dangerous path. All right, because if they're going to go against the Satanists today, who else are they going to come after tomorrow? All right, I will leave it at that. What questions do you all have from this? Oh, the horrors. We cannot let children see candles. Candles are wicked. Oh, wait, they have candles in church too. Yes. And again, they have Satan in church as well. He comes up a lot. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you too, Godless Granny. Nice to see you. You gotta love how in December, theists collectively lose their minds by claiming that they are the ever oppressed, while being the exact antithesis to that by actively oppressing others. I mean, conservative Christians very much act like everyone should be celebrating Christmas. It's their God. Why wouldn't you? They act like they own all of December. And the second anyone's like, oh, right, you don't own December and you don't own the Capitol building, everyone can use it. They get very offended by anyone else wanting what they have. There's so much more material that's inappropriate for children in the Bible than in anything the Satanic Temple would be presenting. No kidding. At this point, the new Satanic Temple display should just have Bible verses all over it, and all the obscene, creepy ones specifically, and make them at least take that down. At least say, why are you trying to get rid of the Bible verses? Nothing is American is standing up to the minority. Yes, it's the Republican motto these days. So glad you're on today. I need this sanity. Honestly, that's why I'm here too. I needed to get this out because I don't want to wait another week to talk about some of this stuff. Thank you for watching. All right, let's go to a different story here. Give me 1 second. All right. Let's talk about the Boy Scouts of America, or as they are now known, Scouting America. That's their new name, in case you missed the change a while back. But yeah, Scouting America is in the news this week for a specific reason that involves Pete Hegseth, who made a brilliant cameo on South Park. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. Anyway, do you remember back in Trump's first term, Trump spoke at a Boy Scout event? It's called Jamboree. It's a huge national gathering of the Boy Scouts. And at the time, people made a lot of fun of it because Trump treated it like a campaign rally. And I know he does that all the time with everything, but like you're talking to little boys and Trump is like going off on his perceived enemies. And he also told a story about a guy who liked sexy yacht parties. And it's like, my dude, there are 8-year-olds in the crowd. What are you doing, you senile old man? But that's basically this administration's history with the Boy Scouts. Now, the Boy Scouts basically make the president of the United States like their honorary president. And it's been happening for decades and decades. And every president is like, I love the Boy Scouts. And then Trump's like, let me tell you about sexy yacht parties. Anyway, what's weird that just happened is Pete Hegseth decided the government's no longer going to have anything to do with the Boy Scouts. This is what the announcement was this week. U.S. ready to cut support to Scouts, accusing them of attacking boy-friendly spaces. This is by Graham Smith and Tom Bowman, but check out what they have here. In a draft memo to Congress, this is a letter from Pete Hegseth to Congress, which has not been made public yet. Hegseth criticizes Scouting for being genderless and promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Scouts have become too woke, is Pete Hegseth's basic argument here. And check out the article. The military has provided support to the Scouts for more than 100 years, assistance that was formalized in 1937. But in one memo, Hegseth says, the organization once endorsed by President Theodore Roosevelt no longer supports the future of American boys. So what does Pete Hegseth want? The proposal calls for the Pentagon to no longer provide medical and logistical aid to the National Jamboree, which brings in as many as 20,000 scouts to a remote site in West Virginia. It also says the military will no longer allow scout troops to meet at military installations in the U.S. and abroad, where many bases have active scout programs. So a couple things here. If the Pentagon's not going to provide medical and logistical aid for National Jamboree, that means the Jamboree very well may not happen again. Because if you're bringing in 20,000 boys, members of the Scouts, their families, whatever it is, you need medical tents, you need safety precautions. It takes a lot to hold a gathering of 20,000 people. And the Pentagon was just doing that out of the goodness of its cold dead heart because the Boy Scouts were worth supporting. And if the Pentagon is pulling out of that, that means the Boy Scouts, Scouting America, would have to pay for that stuff separately or find a donor who's going to cover all that. And it's a lot of money. So I don't know what happens to the future of Jamboree. And on top of that, he's saying, we're not going to allow scout troops to meet at military bases. But at a lot of military bases, you have soldiers, you have officials in the military whose families live on those bases. And having the Boy Scouts there is one of those things that, especially if you are a military family that moves from station to station, having a little bit of continuity in your life, if you are a child, is something you very much need, especially if you're losing your friends when you move out of these places. And the Boy Scouts gave these kids some level of continuity, and now they want to take that away. NPR actually spoke to someone. I want to see if I could find this. Yeah, I want to show you this right here. They spoke to a guy named Kenny Grant, who is a retired Army Staff Sergeant, and check out what he said. He served as a sniper in Iraq and is the parent of 3 scouts, 2 girls and a boy. Yes, 2 girls. Because of his military service, his family has moved frequently. We went from Louisiana to Alaska, from Alaska to Germany, from Germany to Texas, but at every military base, there was a scout troop that could help ease the transition to a new home. We don't have to say a word to them. Let them go see the other kids. They will immediately be integrated in. I mean, so that's the benefit of having the scouts have a formal partnership with the US military and the US government. And now Pete Hegseth's like, you're too woke, so let's get rid of it entirely. That's disturbing. And also, this is another thing Hegseth said. His memo to the House and Senate Armed Services Committee argues that the scouts have strayed from their mission to cultivate masculine values. It also claims that with international conflicts and a tight budget, sending troops, doctors, and vehicles to a 10-day youth event would harm national security by diverting resources from border operations and protecting U.S. territory, which is bullshit because Pete Hegseth and Kristi Noem, they're like spending money on filmmaking stuff so they can post content online. They're like purchasing like private jet time for Kash Patel's girlfriend. Like, what? They're wasting money on all sorts of things. So don't tell me it's a budget problem. Like, the Defense Department has a bigger budget than pretty much anybody. They have the money. And if they needed money, they can get the money. So don't pretend like we just got to tighten our belts. And the first thing to go is not anything that helps me make videos for TikTok. It's got to be the Boy Scouts. Screw the boys. So that's what Pete Hegseth wants to do. They also say in the memo, he's saying Boy Scouts Scouting America is attacking boy-friendly spaces. It's pushing gender confusion. So let's talk about that for just a second. In case you need a reminder of this, the Boy Scouts of America have been around for a long time. They changed its name a few years ago because they decided, our brand is not doing that well. For a lot of Americans, it's not about boys learning useful skills anymore and becoming model citizens. We are pretty much known for harboring sexual predators in our troops. The Boy Scouts faced over 82,000 lawsuits from alleged victims. And then they also became known for who they were keeping out and not who they were allowing in. So over the course of several years, starting in 2013, they said, we will allow for the first time openly gay troops. So if you're a boy, you're a teenager, you're openly gay, we don't care. We're not going to kick you out over that. That was 2013. In 2015, they said, if you're openly gay, you can be a troop leader. That's fine. You still got to, I assume, go through the background checks and everything, but we're not going to kick you out if you're openly gay and want to be a leader. That was in 2015. In 2017, they said we will allow trans boys to be members of the Scouts. And in 2019, they just said the things we are teaching are not limited to one gender or something. So they allowed girls in 2019. And none of that, by the way, has reversed their overall declining membership. And none of that changed the massive payouts they had to make to settle all those lawsuits. The Boy Scouts eventually filed for bankruptcy. Like, if you go back about 5 decades to the early 1970s, the Boy Scouts of America had about 5 million members. Today, it's closer to 1 million, and it feels like it's going down all the time. And what Pete Hegseth is doing now, it's a really short-sighted move that will ultimately hurt everybody involved here. Because the Scouts rely on government support to do a lot of what they do. The military, by the way, benefits from that too, because when they are sponsoring all these things for boys, guess what? Those boys get good vibes with the military. A lot of Eagle Scouts go on to work for the military. The military gives those Eagle Scouts higher pay, which, by the way, that's going to go away too if Hegseth's initiative kicks in. So I don't know why, even if you have issues with the military, and don't we all, I do not understand why Hegseth is trying to break up this relationship that's been working really well for a long time. And I mean, we know why he's doing it, because he's on a quest to destroy anything in the military that seems unmanly without taking into account any advice from people who have been there for a lot longer than he has and have served practically their entire lives. Okay, that's why what Pete Hegseth is doing is stupid. That said, I would also argue it's kind of long past time for the government to stop working with the Boy Scouts. And I know that makes me sound hypocritical, but the benefits that we were just talking about with that relationship between the two sides, you could do that without supporting the Boy Scouts specifically. You could have a group on military bases that is teaching children basic skills and how to be a good ethical person. It doesn't have to be tied to the Boy Scouts. You could find ways to work with boys who might be interested in the military or girls who might be interested in the military, but it doesn't have to be through that organization, because my beef is with the organization and not with the kids or families who are part of it. And why do I want the military to break ties with the Boy Scouts specifically? Because you know how I just said they started letting everybody in slowly but surely? You know what? One group of boys and girls, they still exclude openly non-religious people. They still say if you are openly atheist, you cannot be a member of the Scouts. You cannot be a troop leader. They will allow trans boys and girls to come in. But if you're an atheist, you're not allowed to be in the Scouts unless you keep that hidden, which a lot of my atheist friends have said they did. And here's where I'm getting that information from. Specifically, there's something called the Scout Oath and Scout Law. Look at the first part of this. Look at the Scout Oath. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God. ... Look at the Scout Law. The Scout Law is 12 things you're supposed to be. Like, what is a Scout? Trustworthy, loyal, helpful. All of that is very nice. But if you scroll down to the bottom, the last item, reverent. Be reverent toward God. Be faithful in your religious duties. Respect the beliefs of others. If you are not reverent because you're an atheist, well, then you're not keeping the Scout Law. Therefore, you can't be a Scout. And if you don't want to take the oath that says you're going to do your best to do your duty to God, you can't be a Scout. By the way, the Scouts also have a declaration of religious principle for chaplains. But look at what they say here. And it no longer says Boy Scouts of America. Now it just says Scouting America. Scouting America maintains that no member can grow into the best kind of citizen without recognizing an obligation to God. You can't even be a good citizen, the best kind of citizen, unless you believe in some sort of bullshit. Only persons willing to subscribe to this declaration of religious principle and to the bylaws of Scouting America shall be entitled to certificates of membership. I mean, okay, so all of this stuff makes very clear if you are openly godless, the Scouts want nothing to do with you. And there have been lawsuits over this, but basically the Boy Scouts and Scouting America, it is a private organization. They are allowed to have these bigoted kinds of rules. But usually when you talk to atheists about why are you mad at the Boy Scouts, it's like a church. They're allowed to set their framework for who's allowed to be a member. Okay, but then why is the government involved in them? Why is the government promoting the Boy Scouts? Because the Boy Scouts and now Scouting America is a discriminatory organization. That's been the legal issue with the Boy Scouts and why people have wanted to see the government and the Boy Scouts break up for a long time. Right? So that's the issue. If Scouting America wanted to teach kids values like loyalty, kindness, and friendliness, why are you so hell-bent on excluding atheists from membership? In case you're wondering, by the way, the Girl Scouts, which has nothing to do with the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts have never excluded atheists, and they've been doing just fine, and their cookies are yummy. The sky did not fall. And it wouldn't fall if the Boy Scouts allowed atheists in either, but they have not done that despite all their other problems. Also, reverence is a stupid goal. You don't need that one on the list. Just get rid of it. So now it may not matter anyway, because religious groups have also said what Pete Hegseth is saying, like, oh, you're letting in gay people now? You're letting in girls? Well, guess what? We're going to form our own alternative to the Boy Scouts. It's the same way conservative Christians treat Hollywood. It's like, oh, your movies make fun of Christianity. Well, we're going to make our own movies, and casts Kevin Sorbo in them, and then you'll see. And pretty much all of those movies are flops, and they're poorly made, and everyone mocks them because all their Christian alternatives to stuff that already exists is always a poor quality version of the real thing. And that's also true of the Boy Scout alternatives, but they do have those. The Mormon Church has abandoned the Boy Scouts in a lot of ways, even though they were like their biggest fans. So, and now Pete Hegseth and the federal government wants to abandon the group because it's not masculine enough, as if kindness and loyalty depend on whether you have a penis. I don't know. It's weird. Hegseth is so obsessed with performative masculinity. He will burn anything down if it doesn't flatter his own insecurities. Like, he's not abandoning Scouting America because of all the sex abuse or all their historic failures. It's because he's having a temper tantrum and he doesn't want Trump to fire him. So he's so mad that Scouting America's like LGBTQ people are real and we want them in the fold. And they recognize that boys are not just one-dimensional caricatures of toughness. And, they affirm that girls and trans boys should be allowed to participate in activities that strengthen character and foster community. And Hegseth is like, what? No, absolutely not. So he's chosen the laziest possible narrative that the Scouts don't deserve his support because they're too woke. I mean, it's too bad. I feel like he accidentally stumbled into doing the right thing. Like, the government should have cut ties to Scouting America years ago, not because they were too inclusive, but because they were still exclusive. And also the enabling sex predators and all that stuff. It would have been courageous if Hegseth said the government's not going to work with the group because it's still discriminating against a large portion of Americans. Maybe even pressuring them to get with the times and change their stupid rules. But instead, Hegseth does what he always does and turn this into some sort of culture war stunt. So here's where we're at. Scouting America is now being punished. It looks like this is going to be a real thing for the dumbest possible reason. After years of dragging their feet, they slowly came around to doing the right things in most cases and letting in groups of children who were previously excluded. And now they're being punished for not staying in the past, which wasn't working for them. So the Republican government's going to cut ties, even despite all the benefits the Scouts gives to children and their families, especially in the military. I mean, it's a disgraceful thing for Hegseth to do, but I mean, that's kind of his job description, right? It's just, how can you make the military worse? Just ask Pete Hegseth. He'll figure it out. All right, I will stop there for now. What questions you got here? Do they think this decision is going to bode well for their next election cycle? Oh, see, I think you're asking the wrong question because none of the shit they're doing is going to play well. But it does make sense if you don't think they're ever going to have real elections again. Or if they're so hell-bent on thinking, if we just do what our base wants, they'll come around eventually. And the truth is, a lot of voters will not remember any of this stuff by the time the next election comes around. So on that, I guess it's not a big deal for their voters. A lot of voters are stupid. A lot of voters know about this stuff and think it's not going to affect me. And by the way, when I say stupid, I mean legitimately they see what's happening and they don't care, or they don't think it'll affect them. That's different from voters who are apathetic because they got other shit to do, so they don't spend all their time reading up or watching TV news. I have sympathy for those people. They think that we just need change because everything sucks. And then they end up voting for people who make things worse. So is the decision going to bode well for the next election cycle? I don't think it's going to matter by the time the next election cycle comes around, because this isn't going to be at the top of the list of election crises. But also, if they actually cared about doing what was good electorally, they would make a lot of different decisions. And that is a scary thought too, because that suggests they don't really care what the election results are going to be, do they? The Scouts are not Christian nationalists. They are a separate Christianity that takes from the Christian nationalists. Did I say the Scouts were Christian nationalists? I don't think I did. But it is very much a form of, like, Alcoholics Anonymous. We've talked about them in the past too. They have a 12-step program to help you overcome your addiction. And one of those things is giving yourself up to a higher power. And they say very specifically, just like the Boy Scouts do, we're not telling you you need to be Christian. We're not even saying you need to believe in God, though the Boy Scouts are doing that. Alcoholics Anonymous says your higher power can be whatever you want. It just can't be you. Okay, wishy-washy. I don't love that. That's a weird thing. But that's the point. Like, is Alcoholics Anonymous a Christian organization? Kinda. Even though they don't specify it. Is the Boy Scouts a Christian organization? No, not on paper. Like, Muslims are allowed in the Boy Scouts, but you got to be religious. That's their rule, and it's a bad rule. So I don't think they're Christian nationalists, but I do think they foolishly think belief in God is a virtue, and that is wrong. And it is wild to me that even though they have changed on some big things, they still somehow idiotically think that you got to believe in God to be a good boy and a good citizen. That's ridiculous. You don't. Honest question. Are the Scouts a tax-exempt nonprofit? Yes, I believe they are. Yep. The LDS Church already left the Scouts over calling all of this woke for what it's worth, so Hegseth is in alignment with Mitt Romney on this, I guess. Yeah, I actually don't know what Mitt Romney says about all this these days. But yeah, I mean, their biggest religious clientele, because again, they're catering to the religious, they've all formed their alternative groups. Whether it's, what is it called, like Trail Life or something else. Like, they all have alternative versions of the Boy Scouts that do everything the Boy Scouts did, but inject a big dose of Jesus into it, and just make a thing that was all right. They just make it worse. I don't know. I'm not surprised the LDS Church left. Thanks for that donation here. Just like the Christians, the Scouts are deathly afraid of becoming mythology rather than a truth, which is why I don't get it. Like, the Scouts understand the need to adapt. That's why they have been adapting, and yet not when it comes to the God thing. It's like, you could have saved yourself a lot of hassle a long time ago if you just did that. Like, your brand is not good, so what do you have to lose at this point? I'm starting the Friendly Atheist Scouts. Love it. That's got to be a boring ass group. True story. I was a Cub Scout for a couple of years because it's what all my friends were doing in school. And I don't remember any of the God stuff because I wasn't thinking about religion at the time. And it wasn't a big part in what I did, because it's not like we sat around and said the Boy Scout law or the oath or anything. Maybe we did it at a ceremony, but like, I don't remember any of it because it wasn't a factor. I just remember trying to build my little Pinewood Derby car, and it failed. And then I was done with the Scouts. But again, if you're someone who's an out atheist and you're like a teenager who's trying to become an Eagle Scout, guess what? You are thinking about those things. Some of them are. And then they have to decide, should I lie about who I am in order to get my Eagle Scout badge? Or do I just suck it up? You know, do I lie about it, or do I be open about it and then risk getting kicked out? And all that work I've done is for nothing now. I mean, I learned stuff, but I don't get the certificate for it. It's a bad position to put kids in. All right, I'm jumping to another story. Give me a second here. I have a guess. Got one right. Go me. All right. I'm so excited to share this story with you because it is a thing I didn't even know was happening a few days ago, and now I'm fully obsessed with it. There is a celebration happening in Ventura, California, in the Ventura County Fairgrounds, and it's called Merry Gothmas. And I have to show you this website. Look at this thing. It's the second Merry Gothmas. It's happening December 13th and 14th. It's like the Nightmare Before Christmas come to life. And it looks kind of amazing. It's a mix of Halloween and Christmas. And if you go to their little information page, again, just adorable. Look at what's written up here. Merry Gothmas is a family-friendly celebration of the dark and delightful, featuring eerie artists, wickedly wonderful creators, and haunted holiday treasures to shop during the unhappy holidays. And they also say down here, I really appreciate what they say on the left side of your screen here. This all ages celebration welcomes every shade of goth, trad, emo, romantic, vampire, elder, pastel, cyber, and new goth alike. By the way, I don't know like 6 of those. I'm very intrigued as someone who very clearly knows nothing about being goth. At Merry Gothamus, all are embraced. Straight, LGBTQ+, BIPOC, body positive, sex positive, neurodivergent, and unapologetically unique. Whoever you are, whatever you are, you belong here. I mean, this thing looks amazing. Look at this. Look at that. How do you not want to go? It's just like a festival. People set up their booths and their tents and they sell their merchandise. And you can, it's tailor-made for like taking pictures and showing people how cool this could be. So anyway, that is what they're doing. And this year's event, it's the second one. It's probably going to be even bigger than the one they did last year. But that also means because it's bigger, it's drawing a little more scrutiny. And apparently, late last week, a coalition of religious leaders sent a letter to the head of the Ventura County Fairgrounds, which is a local government operation, demanding that Merry Gothmas be shut down. Why? Because it's offensive to Christians. I'm going to show you the letter. I don't think this has been published anywhere, but I was able to get access to it. They make it sound like this whole thing is hate speech. So let me show you what they said here. All right. We, the undersigned, demand the immediate cancellation of the above event on the grounds that it is a serious and deliberate offense to the interests of the Christian community and sympathetic other sisters and brothers of faith of Ventura County. Okay, what are they mad about? The event is marketed as an attempt to summon spirits with the assistance of dark vendors offering, among other things, witchy wares, all with the goal of embracing the darker side of the season. These references to spirits, witchcraft, and darkness are all not very subtle references to the occult. Practices of this type are offensive to Christians and inimical to Christian belief. This is not a harmless pun. It is an attempt to distort the name of Christmas, a solemn and religiously significant holiday for Christian believers. This type of mockery is completely inappropriate. Would you... Oh, now we get the analogies. Consider, for example, whether the Ventura County Fairgrounds would host an event featuring perhaps a pork barbecue and bearing the name that was a distortion of a Jewish or Islamic holy day? Gothmadon, was that what that would be or something? That obviously would not be allowed. The name Gothmas clearly is a distortion of the name Christmas, which literally means Christ's Mass. Oh my God, these people. An event of this type poses a grave threat to the spiritual health of the people of Ventura County. Permitting such an event to proceed under a name that also mocks Christianity is grievously inappropriate. How dare you? We therefore request an immediate meeting, ... Who signed off on this? Catholic. I don't know where the rabbi got in there from. Like, why is a Jewish rabbi jumping on the Jesus bandwagon here? But it looks like these are a lot of Catholic leaders in the area. And only Catholic leaders in the area, and like one Jewish friend who they found. And there you go. That's the letter that was sent to the city. It's ridiculous. They're just mad that a non-Christian group is celebrating anything. And what, apparently they own the word Christmas? Since when? I mentioned this in a different segment, but like Christians don't own December. They don't own December 25th. Christmas can be a religious holiday, but as we all know, it's very much a cultural thing. Mariah Carey is not saying she wants you on the day of the birth of Christ or something like that. Like, it is a cultural celebration. My family celebrates Christmas. Do we go to church? Of course not. We do presents and shit and spend time with each other. Like, like it's fine. That's what a lot of people do. It's not a religious thing for a lot of people. And the letter basically argues that pagans, Wiccans, any other explicitly non Christian group are inherently anti Christian and should therefore be banished from public spaces if they're holding events that riff on a well known cultural celebration. Keep in mind, these people said you are mocking our religion. No, they're not. They use the name Christmas, but it's not like you're going there to like burn an effigy of the crucifixion or something like that. They're not burning Bibles at this festival, I promise you. So what is your complaint exactly? Religious freedom does not only apply for people who celebrate Christmas and no one else. By the way, I was looking this up. There is a lottery game called Oh Cashmas Tree. It's one of those scratch off lottery games. I've never seen these conservative Christians go after that for mocking their faith. How many companies use Christian symbols to promote their products this time of year? Are the leaders protesting those too? Right? Like Santa Claus is not in the Bible. A lot of people with no religious allegiance enjoy the spirit of the holiday season. That is a very far cry from mocking a Jewish or Islamic holiday, holy day, that leaves no broader cultural footprint. Like, sorry, Muslims, Ramadan, people are not celebrating secular versions of it. But Christmas is very much a cultural thing as much as it is a religious thing. By the way, Christmas is a pagan holiday anyway. If anything, let the Goths have this one. It's theirs. The protesters should be coming to the event to pay their damn respects. Like, if this event is a grave threat to your spiritual health, maybe your faith is pretty weak. Who is seeing a sign for Mary Gothmas and saying, oh no, my religion, I can't go on? Oh my God. By the way, that Jewish synagogue, I still don't get why the Jewish lady, the Jewish rabbi signed on to this. I looked at her synagogue's website. It's like a pro-LGBTQ synagogue. That sounds great. Why are you mad at these people? I don't know. Anyway, so this week, the group behind Mary Gothmas ended up publishing this. It was a public statement about the letter, and this is what they said. To be clear, I'll try to zoom in here. To be clear, Mary Gothmas is a holiday market, not a religious gathering and not an anti-religious one. There's nothing harmful, hateful, or inappropriate about celebrating creativity in our own unique way. We respect everyone's right to their beliefs and to peacefully express them, and we kindly ask that the same respect be extended to our artists, vendors, guests, and families attending. So they are moving forward with the event, which is fantastic. I spoke to Christina Diaz. She's the person behind Seaside Oddities Expo, which is the group that founded Mary Gothmas and who's basically curating this event. And she told me they're not backing down because they were never doing anything wrong in the first place. They were not trying to alienate anybody. Like, lawyers can hash this out. For what it's worth, the Ventura County lawyers, I'm sure, are looking at this letter and saying, anyway, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? Like, I'm sure that's what they were doing when they saw this. But the point is, if Ventura County cancels this event, that basically means no group could ever use it because everything is offensive to somebody. A Christian group's display, if they wanted to hold a Christmas celebration and a church wanted to sponsor it and they filled out the paperwork to have access to this public space, well, I'm offended by some of the things they believe. Am I allowed to get their thing shut down? That would be ridiculous. And again, there's nothing anti-Christian about Mary Gothmas. Here's what Christina told me via email this week. Our events have always been inclusive spaces that welcome people of all backgrounds, beliefs, and traditions. I'll put this up here so you can see this. This year, some local churches have voiced concerns and may choose to protest. While we respect their right to peaceful expression, these claims misrepresent what our event is. Mary Gothmas is not a religious gathering, nor does it promote any belief system. It's simply a spooky-themed holiday market featuring artists, makers, and performers who love alternative aesthetics. We're grateful for the overwhelming support from the community and look forward to another successful event. And I love that response. I hope that's exactly how this plays out. I mean, so far, all I have learned about Mary Gothamus is that there are religious zealots in the community of Ventura County who are so fragile in their beliefs and they cannot withstand anyone even mildly opposing them, which again, opposing them is not what Mary Gothamus is all about. Like, there's no spiritual danger going on here. I think these mostly conservative Christians are just mad that this festival taking place in December doesn't make them the center of attention. Mary Gothamus does not diminish Christianity. It does not insult Christian worship. It just exists. If you don't want to go, no one's making you go, right? The festival should go on. It better go on because there is a demand for it. And the way Christina responded to all of this, think about how calm and inclusive and clear she is compared to the fear mongers who are writing that crazy ass letter. Like, what are they mad about? If you're offended by a mild pun, you have no business leading a church, much less demanding that local government shut down an event. This is not about Christmas. This is a question of whether public spaces should be open to all the public or just the fraction of the public that accepts Christianity. And the louder those religious leaders whine, the more clear it is that no one should take any of them seriously. I'll stop there for now. What questions we got here? It's a war on Gothamus. I know. It's awful. Make this a thing. Where's Fox News? They should be all over this. Gothica. Ooh, that's a better. Yes. 8 days, too. We should make that happen. Who's on board? I don't understand how they don't get that this is a pushback against the fundamentally exclusionary nature of modern Christianity. That's true. I would also argue, I don't even know that they're pushing back against any of that. They're just like, let's have a holiday festival, a winter festival. There's a lot of people who make really cool shit. Let's give them a chance to sell it. And by the way, to draw people in, you need a theme. And maybe the theme can be Gothic, Halloween-esque. Everyone misses Halloween. It's short-lived. So let's go have some fun. It's not even about anti-Christian or anti-modern Christianity or anything like that. My understanding of this story is Christians want their pagan holiday to be respected like other pagan holidays, but treated superior to pagan holidays. And I'm like, pagan schmagan, it's all magic. Well said. Thank you. Yes. I want this. How dare there not be one near me? I want it now too. I mean, would I actually go? No, I hate going out. But I do like the idea that it would be there close to me. So maybe they can make this one successful and then we can do more of it. All right, I'm jumping to another story. Give me a second here. All right, what's the answer? All right. Let's talk about something extremely serious. This one made news across the ocean. You may have seen this headline recently. Check this out. Family wins appeal in UK Supreme Court over religious education. And this just happened in the UK. Basically, the UK Supreme Court ruled that the religious education curriculum taught in Northern Ireland is illegal because it treats Christianity as if it's true. And that faith, and only that faith, is elevated above other religions and non-religion, even though religious education is supposed to be objective, critical, and pluralistic. And they just said, when we look at the curriculum, this is indoctrinating kids with Christianity. It is not just teaching them about it, which is kind of the point of the course. So we're going to strike it down. And as a result of this decision, religious education in Northern Ireland is going to have to be revised to give more weight to other religions and humanism, by the way, while also being more critical of Christianity. And they're going to try to even the playing field as much as possible, which is a wild, amazing thing to have happen. And it took years for this to happen. So let me try to give you some backstory here because it's a fascinating story. So this specific case started in 2019 when a child who is known in the court documents, it's an anonymous kid, but in the documents known as JR87, JR87, they were attending what Americans would call a public elementary school. And that made this girl's non-religious parents sent a letter to the school because they were like, hey, we heard what you're teaching our daughter in school and we're not supporting it. It's weird. They're like, we're fine with our daughter learning about religion because that's what the law says and we think that's a good thing. But she's now telling us that God created the world and she's now saying Christian prayers at home. Where is she getting that nonsense from? And the school did not have a good response to that. I mean, they just said, we're just going to keep teaching our curriculum. And the parents, they also said, if you don't like what we're doing, you do have the option of taking your daughter out of the classroom when we are teaching those lessons. And the parents said, no, because we want our daughter to learn about religion. We just don't want her getting indoctrinated into Christianity. And by the way, that's what the law says you're supposed to do. And also, if they removed this girl from the classroom, as I'm sure many of you would have guessed, they worried that their daughter would be bullied or isolated as a result. So this became a much larger issue because if the school really is following the law as they said they were, then it's not the school that's the problem, it's the law that's the problem. So what did the law actually say? Well, let me show you what the law says. Here's the law in regards to religious education. And I realize I am an ignorant American trying to explain law in the UK, so bear with me here. But basically, this is what it says about religious education. And I know the formatting is weird, whatever, deal with it. Basically, they say religious education shall be given in every grant-aided school, other than a nursery school, and the school day in every such school shall also include collective worship. So every school has to do like a collective prayer. That's weird. What else do they say? In a controlled school, other than a controlled integrated school, the religious education required up there shall be undenominational religious education. That is to say, education based upon the Holy Scriptures. So, in English, what they're saying is, yeah, religious education, you got to teach it. And you can't tell them to be Methodist or Lutheran. You just got to teach them to be Christian because that's what the scriptures say. Like, what the hell? Sure as hell looks like the law is the problem here and not just the school. And then that means you want to see what the actual curriculum looks like. Let me show you a little bit of it. Here is like page 3 of what they teach certain kids. Learning objective 1, the revelation of God. What should kids learn? Well, pupils should begin to develop an awareness, knowledge, understanding, and appreciation of the key Christian teachings about God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, about Jesus Christ, and about the Bible, and begin to develop an ability to interpret and relate the Bible to life. What do we have to teach? Oh, well, you have to teach kids that the Bible is the Word of God. Jesus knew the scriptures. God's care for creation. Hey, kids, you got to learn God is the creator of all things and creation is good. Do you need me to go on here? You get the point. This is not teaching them, hey, kids, this is what Christians believe, which would be okay, assuming the rest of it was objective as well. They're telling kids Christianity is real, and then telling kids, yeah, this is a Sunday school curriculum that is being taught in public schools. That's the problem here. And that's just page 1 I just showed you. The curriculum goes on to say that teachers have to tell kids that God is the creator of all things, that prayer is a way of talking to God so we can thank him, praise him, say sorry, and ask for help, that it's important to develop a respect for God, and that they need to connect Christian moral principles to their personal and social life. Like, in no way is this objective teaching about religion. This is pro-Christian propaganda. And like, why wouldn't it be? That curriculum was written in 2007 by the four main Christian churches in Northern Ireland: the Catholic Church, the Church of Ireland, the Presbyterian Church, and the Methodist Church. Other religions were barely mentioned. In fact, the only time students were required to learn about non-Christian religious beliefs, it was in one unit on world religion, and it's much later in their education, long after they were indoctrinated into Christianity. So that's what the law said you had to teach in public school. And it's very ironic, given that, like, if you look at recent surveys, more than a quarter of people in Northern Ireland, like 27%, were non-religious as recently as 2021. I suspect the number is higher than that today. So in the court documents, let me show you what JR87's father said. He's known as G in the court documents. Here's what he said in an affidavit trying to explain what his problem was. Check this out. I tried to bracket it off here. I find certain aspects of Christian morality and ethics in Northern Ireland to be disturbing, such as the long-standing and continued discrimination by the main churches against LGBT people in Northern Ireland, and I do not want my daughter to be taught that such intolerant and potentially harmful beliefs are true, rather than based on an assumption that the Bible is the infallible word of God. I mean, that seems pretty fair. So that is what this document said. And guess what happened in 2022? The High Court in Belfast basically ruled. Let me show you the ruling here. I'm going to remove this right here. Look at number 74. This is their conclusion. In short, a fair analysis of the syllabus leads to the conclusion that under the curriculum, religious education is not conveyed in an objective, critical, and pluralist manner. Wow. Like, they're basically admitting, yeah, the dad has a point. And so that is an incredible thing for them to say. I will tell you that decision was later appealed by the UK's Department of Education, and it was overturned. And the Court of Appeals said, yeah, the curriculum is pro-Christianity, but the family can just take their daughter out of class, so there's no legal problem here. We're not forcing her to learn it. That's not indoctrination if the family can just opt out. And so the Court of Appeals said, yeah, it's a good point. So they overturned it, and then that got appealed. That's how this case made it to the UK's Supreme Court. And what just happened a couple of weeks ago, or at least in November, is that the UK Supreme Court unanimously agreed that the religious education curriculum in Northern Ireland, it amounted to indoctrination of Christianity, and that it was unfair to ask the family to just remove their kid from the classroom if they didn't want to hear it. Check this out. This is from the Supreme Court's ruling, number 88. There is no commitment in the core syllabus to objectivity or to the development of critical thought. To teach pupils to accept a set of beliefs without critical analysis amounts to evangelism, proselytizing, and indoctrination. Rather, the core syllabus encourages pupils faithfully to accept the existence of the Christian God, to accept that good things come from the Christian God, that the Christian God can help in times of adversity, and that morality is based upon and derived from the existence of the Christian God. Did I write this decision? That is incredible. That is wild. And by the way, they also said in the same thing, and I want to find this for you here. One more thing. Check this one out. Number 123. Conveying knowledge in a manner which is not objective, critical, and pluralistic on the one hand, and indoctrination on the other are, as I have just said, different sides of the same coin. Conveying knowledge in that manner amounts to pursuing the aim of indoctrination. They are saying that the people writing this religious education curriculum are trying to indoctrinate kids. So, the end result of that decision is that students in Northern Ireland will soon have to learn about the religious beliefs of other religions and non-religious philosophy, and yes, Christianity, but objectively. And they got to learn all of that from a young age. So the way Christianity is taught to them will have to be made more objective. Basically, this religious education curriculum has to be completely overhauled and rewritten, even though it's been in use for like 2 decades. And even though the ideas behind them have been in Northern Ireland schools for much longer. So I spoke to the Northern Ireland Humanist Coordinator. His name is Boyd Sleater. And he told me that the way the curriculum is going to change now, that has yet to be determined. It's not like the Supreme Court said, we're going to give you this curriculum to use or anything. And in fact, they don't know how that new curriculum is going to be written. Like the government has to say, here's how we're going to do it. They need to put people on a panel to make it. And it may take more legal battles to clarify how this stuff gets taught. But he seemed pretty optimistic that this was going to be handled the right way. I, an American, am not very optimistic about government officials doing the right thing. So I was a little surprised to see someone saying, well, the Supreme Court said this, so our government officials, I trust that they'll get it done. But that was interesting to see. But I also asked him, how does the family, they go by anonymous names in the court documents, how are they feeling about this? And he told me they were thrilled, that they were over the moon about the outcome. And in fact, the lawyer for the family, this is what he said to the BBC. Check this out. We are hearing again from, don't ask me to pronounce the name, I'm sorry, who represented the family in this legal challenge. I think that this is probably the single most important legal decision for education, certainly in the last century. Wow. And I also appreciated this tweet from a government official. She's a Northern Ireland Assembly member, Nuala McAllister. Look at what she said. As a parent who opts out of religious education because it is not education, I've been following this closely for years. I don't want my kids at the back of the classroom. I want them to learn about all faiths and inclusive education. So that is awesome. Now, not everyone is happy with the decision. There is basically a right-wing conservative leader. This is what he said in response to this. Don't ask me to explain the Irish political system. I will screw it up. But TUV leader Jim Allister, here's what he said. The language used, particularly the inflammatory term indoctrination, this is my Irish accent, is an affront not only to teachers and parents, but to the Christian foundations upon which our education system has long rested. I reject entirely the suggestion that Christian teaching in our schools amounts to indoctrination. My dude, it absolutely is. That word has been weaponized to belittle the sincere Christian ethos that shaped our society, our laws, and our moral compass. It is an insult to the thousands of teachers who faithfully and honorably deliver religious education. Moreover, in this judgment, we see another insidious elevation of rights of non-Christian parents over those of Christian parents. This is how you know he's bullshitting. What rights did the non-Christian parents gain from all this? They said, no, we like religious education. We just want our daughter to get a real education. And what did the Christian parents get? They still get that same religious education. It's just not biased in their favor. If they want biased education, they can go to church. Is that not an option in Ireland? Northern Ireland? I hate it every time they act like this because they always treat neutrality as oppression. If you are a conservative Christian, you think neutrality is always oppression. The fact is, if Islam or secular humanism were taught to students in Northern Ireland the same way they've been teaching Christianity to those kids for decades now, that guy would be having an aneurysm. He cannot see the problem because he thinks Christianity, and specifically the kind he practices, it should just be the default for everybody, which is not how anything works. Now, One of the other things in this decision was about collective worship. I mentioned that up top. Like the law says you got to do this collective worship in schools, and that is exclusively Christian also. That's still around, but that's not the thing that's being challenged right now. Check this out. This is what Boyd Slater commented. The judgment is a historic win for the rights of children in Northern Ireland. The Supreme Court has concluded that the religious education syllabus is indoctrination, and the right to withdraw from religious education and mandatory collective worship is insufficient to deal with this. The ruling should also prompt the governments in England, Scotland, and Wales to revisit the requirement for mandatory collective worship. We hope it is now repealed. So that's phase 2. Getting rid of collective worship, which is also a Christian indoctrination of sorts. So it seems like this ruling reinforces what the critics have been saying for years now, which is that for generations, Northern Ireland outsourced its religious education curriculum to churches. And then they acted like the curriculum was neutral. It was not, because the goal was never to inform kids about Christianity. It was to mold them into soldiers for Christ and to ensure that Christianity remained the default. So it is long past time for this curriculum to change, not just because it was wrong to begin with, but because the people of Northern Ireland, the demographics of those people are different than they were decades ago. Like, you can't understand society without a deeper understanding of the beliefs that a lot of the people have in that community. And Christianity is no longer the only game in town. So for decades, families who didn't share that faith, they were told to either put up with a religious curriculum that contradicted their most basic values, or remove their children from the classroom and just accept the stigma that comes along with that. The court has now said unequivocally that is not okay. That's not really a choice at all, and we're not going to put up with it. So the path forward is obvious and unavoidable. It means equal time to other religious beliefs, more time anyway, to other religious beliefs. Let's downplay the way we teach Christianity, because no student should ever be pressured into participating in Christian worship that contradicts their family's own beliefs. It also means they're going to have to tackle mandatory Christian collective worship. But all of that, it's a step in the right direction. It means they are embracing diversity and not some archaic religious monoculture. So good job to the UK Supreme Court and the family that brought this lawsuit, because it took years for this to happen. And now it's up to educators and lawmakers to take the baton and fix this problem next. I will stop there. What questions we got here? Oops. I'm from Northern Ireland and can confirm, not that it was necessary, that this little country is still a religious basket case. Maybe in leadership. However, all the surveys have said even those demographics are changing quickly. So, I mean, I'll take your word for that, but I'd like to think there are some big changes being made. I think that's the key. When you hear all these beliefs, if they are presented equally, the effect is non-belief. I mean, that's certainly the Christian line here. They don't want you to learn about all religions, because then you'll get this bizarre, you'll start to think that all religions are more or less no different from each other. They all want you to act a certain way, believe a bunch of things, like they're all bullshit. And that's their fear. That's why they need their mythology to be treated as fact, and everyone else's beliefs to be taught as mythology. Did you do the whole everything wrong with the Bible series? No, pretty much what you saw is what I did. I think I did the first 5 books of the Bible and a couple other things mixed in there. But that's it. At that point, I was like, I need to move on from this because I hate myself and I can't do this for much longer. So I moved on. And now I'm doing this live stream. That happened after that series. Friendly Atheist live stream, your family that you want to be with on the holidays. Thanks, Den. Right? We're having a good time here. This is way better than football, which I'm going to watch as soon as I'm done with this. All right, let me go to a different story. All right, this is a very serious, very disturbing story, but we got to talk about it because it got a lot of. It needs to be spread wider because people need to read what is going on here. Here's the question that kind of opens up this story. What is the right way to reconcile with someone who caused you harm when you were a child? Specifically, what if someone abused you as a child? Should you reconcile with them? And if so, how do you do it? Obviously, there's no right answer to how you do that, but there sure as hell is a wrong way. For example, what if your father drives you to a parking lot to meet your pastor and the guy who abused you so that everyone can just hug it out and then never speak of it again? That is a real thing that just happened, and it involves this church right here, the Old Apostolic Lutheran Church of Duluth, Minnesota. And that is the subject of a stunning article published by ProPublica and the Minnesota Star Tribune. The headline here: young girls were sexually abused by a church member. They were told to forgive and forget. This is Jessica Lussenhop and Andy Mannix writing this piece. But I want to share with you about that parking lot incident. Look at what they said to this girl after her father drove her to that parking lot. In front of the girl, her father, and Daryl Bruckelmeyer, who was the pastor of that church, Clint Massey, who was the alleged abuser, asked her for her forgiveness. Looming over her, the three men wept. Then the girl's dad and preacher allowed the man who had been sexually abusing her since kindergarten to hug her. It was one of the worst things ever, she told police some 15 years later. In accordance with one of the core tenets of their church, the matter was resolved. It was forgiven. It should now be forgotten. If she spoke of it again, she would be guilty of having an unforgiving heart, and the sins would become hers. But she could never forget, and neither could the other children. Oh my God, there are other children. So that's disturbing. Lots of other children. Wait for it. So that's the opening of this article by ProPublica and the Minnesota Star Tribune. They basically say Bruckelmeyer, the pastor running this church, he knew what Clint Massey had done to that girl and to other kids in that church, but his solution always involved forgiveness sessions and never reporting Massey to local law enforcement. Now, you need to know this because we've talked about this in the past. Are clergy members mandated reporters? You know this if you're a social worker at a public school, for example, and you find out that there is abuse going on. A kid tells you that. You see bruises, something like that. You have a legal obligation to report that to your superiors and tell law enforcement. And by the way, pastors in Minnesota, they are mandated reporters. So if they find out about abuse, they have to let law enforcement know too. Now, the times we've talked about that in the past, the question's always, what happens if they learn about abuse through the act of confession? Someone mentioned they were abused or they are an abuser in a confession booth. Then do the pastors have to report it? And all the lawmakers are like, yes. And the clergy members are like, no, we want to keep that a secret. And that's messed up in a lot of ways. But the bottom line is everything I'm just talking about right here, none of this involves the confession booth. All of this is just the pastor very clearly knowing there is abuse going on and still not reporting it to law enforcement. Okay, so Bruckelmeyer, he knew about this guy's actions. He should have reported it. He was legally obligated to report it. He did not report it. And then, because there were no consequences, no real consequences for anything Clint Massey did, guess what happened? Exactly what you would think. The abuse continued, victim after victim. It was only this year that this guy, here's Clint Massey for you right here. It's only this year that he was finally sentenced to any sort of prison time for what he did. And check this out. This is a headline that was in the Duluth News Tribune. Duluth area man sent to prison for sexual abuse of 2 girls. This is dated March of 2025. But as I told you, that girl who went to the parking lot in that opening story, she only told police that, yeah, that happened to me 15 years ago. So this guy only now has been put in jail for a short time for what he did. By the way, he was sentenced to over 7 years in prison for multiple counts of felony criminal sexual conduct with victims under the age of 13. But the fact that he got sentenced, it's not because of the church cooperation. It's because people finally went around the church for this to happen. Okay? And let me share with you some other things that were in that piece that were disturbing in the ProPublica piece. Look at this. Law enforcement first became aware of the allegations against Massey in 2017. They said that the church's lack of cooperation, including pressuring potential witnesses and victims to stay quiet about the abuse and preachers failing to report it to authorities, was a major factor in the delay in bringing charges. The church was actively impeding this investigation because they did not want people to talk about it. And basically, the reason the church never ratted out this guy is because they already had internal policies on how to handle allegations of wrongdoing. What is their solution? Their solution involves things like taking care of the soul, but never telling the cops what's happening. And that meant Bruckelmeyer, the pastor, never faced any punishment for standing in the way of justice, no matter how long the list of victims kept getting. So how did law enforcement find out what this guy was up to, if not from the pastor? Well, let's start with the girl who was told to hug her abuser. She's anonymous in the piece, by the way, but it started when she was 16. She started meeting with a secular counselor, and she started talking about her childhood and what Clint Massey did to her. Well, guess what? A counselor is also a mandated reporter, and she took her job seriously. So she did tell law enforcement what this girl had told her. And then that led to more details from the girl. Look at this part of the article. Sergeant Jessica Labor was the investigator assigned to the case. In a recorded interview, the girl reluctantly told Labor how she used to sit with Massey and his wife Sarah at church just a few rows from the front. Massey would snake his hands up her skirt and touch her thighs and genitals. Another time at a gathering at the home of her parents' friends, she said, Massey told her to get a blanket and began touching her underneath it with her mom and dad nearby. What the hell? You know what's also disturbing in that piece? The girl says she's still a member of that church today because she just believes she's in the right place. Her parents also stopped cooperating with the investigation because they believed that the church's forgive and forget policy is the right one. In fact, the girl's mother later said she believed Massey learned his lesson, even though he was still targeting other children. Like, there's a lot of Stockholm syndrome floating around in this church. But because the family did not want to cooperate with the cops, that meant the cops could not reasonably press charges against that guy. But as of 2017, he was finally on their radar. So over the next few years, the police started getting some anonymous tips about what this guy was up to. They knew he was still abusing children. They knew Bruckelmeyer, the pastor, knew about it, but the victims were still not speaking up. So they tried a different approach. They went to the pastor and said, hey, pastor, do you know what the law says about mandated reporters? Check this out. Like, the sergeant went to meet with the pastor. Labor explained the state's mandatory reporting law to Bruckelmeyer and told him that he and others at the church could be charged criminally if someone that they already know about were to keep abusing children and they failed to report it. I feel like when she says this to them, she's like, wink, wink. Like, come on. And why did the sergeant just kind of like hint at it instead of just saying, we're going to arrest you because you're impeding our investigation? Well, according to the who is Holitz, I think her superior in the police station, I believed it was more effective to work with existing leadership to influence practices and attitudes regarding child abuse reporting rather than to pursue criminal enforcement at that stage. That said, criminal charges for failure to report remain a possibility in such cases. When Labor spoke to Bruckelmeyer, she read him the entire mandated reporter law over the phone, line by line, then texted it to him. They are treating this pastor like a child because he doesn't seem to care or know what the law says. They're explaining it to him line by line. Like, listen, I don't know why they're treating him like a baby here. We are talking about the abuse of children, and they're treating the pastor with kid gloves. I mean, I don't know why they're treating this grown-ass man like a child who doesn't know how basic laws work. They gave him the benefit of the doubt. He never earned the benefit of the doubt. He refused to do everything in his power to protect children. He refused to do anything in his power that could have prevented this abuse. So all of this started in 2017 when cops were aware that this could be happening. But again, no one at this church was speaking up about it because they believed you forgive and forget. It wasn't until 2023 that anything changed. 2023. Why? Because one of Massey's own relatives told police about the abuse she suffered at his hands. So now we're not talking about someone connected to the church. We're talking about his own relative. And at that point, there was a new officer. His name is Adam Kleffman. He took over the case and he decided to contact that girl from 2017. At the time, her family didn't want to cooperate with the cops, but it's been several years. Maybe things have changed in the intervening years. After all, the girl at this point, she was now a married mother with a lot of trauma. Maybe she was willing to go forward with the case now. And that suspicion proved to be useful. Like, she did speak up. And with the help of those two people, the relative of Massey and that girl, Kleffman was able to start contacting other potential victims. But it didn't always go well. Check this out from the article. One woman told Kleffman that Massey had asked for forgiveness. The sin, she said in the recorded call, was washed away in the blood of reconciliation. It is gone forever, she told Kleffman. So you're following what the church says to do? Kleffman replied. I'm following what God says to do, the woman told him before hanging up. So this woman does not want to press charges because she believes it's forgotten now. There's another part I want to share with you here, which is very disturbing. At one point, the cops bring in Bruckelmeyer and Massey. I'm sorry, they bring in Massey for questioning. Check this out. Massey told Kleffman and another officer that Bruckelmeyer had spoken to him at least 3 times about inappropriate behavior with children. The investigators asked how many more girls might come forward with stories about him touching or kissing them. I mean, there could be hundreds. Hundreds. What the hell? And again, none of that matters unless they were willing to testify against him, because this church had brainwashed all those victims into saying, yeah, it happened. Just forgive him and move on with your life. I'm not even blaming the victims here. I mean, that's a sad situation to be in, but this is what they were taught. You don't speak out against this stuff. There was video in the ProPublica article because the cops brought in Bruckelmeyer and another preacher at the church to talk about all this and to remind them that they are mandated reporters. And they told both of those preachers that if you tell a child to forgive and forget, that could be seen as witness tampering because they're basically telling the kids to remain silent. But the preachers were like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what my responsibility is, even though it was explained to them line by line years earlier. In that video, they keep saying things like, of course the victims can talk to you. We never said don't talk to the cops. But what did they tell those victims? They said, forgive this man and then forget about it. and that if they brought up the issue again, they would be going against God's wishes. So even if they weren't stopping the girls from going to the cops, they very much nudged them in the opposite direction. So by the time Massey faced any criminal charges, first of all, Bruckelmeyer avoided any penalties for failing to report abuse because the statute of limitations had run out. And because it took so long for the charges to get filed, basically because of the negligence of the pastors at this church, a lot of those victims saw no justice whatsoever. Look at this. Court filings listed 9 alleged victims, but only 3 of the cases resulted in charges of felony sexual conduct with the victim under the age of 13. The statute of limitations under South Dakota had run out for 2 people who lived there, and the girl who had been pressured to forgive Massey in Bruckelmeyer's office hadn't had her case charged either. Under Minnesota law, too much time had passed between her initial report and the prosecution. Nevertheless, 6 of the alleged victims whose cases did not result in charges were still part of the case. Some of them traveled to Duluth in last December to testify at his trial, but just after jury selection, Massey agreed to plead guilty to 4 felony counts. 1 charge was dropped. And do you know what that means? After jury, they were going to have a trial for Massey. If there was a trial, all of these victims who came to watch his trial could have taken the stand and spoken out against him. But as soon as jury selection was over and this was going to be a thing that was going to happen, Massey said, I'm just going to go ahead and plead guilty to 4 of these charges. I will take the 7 years he got in prison. I'll take that because you know what that meant? That meant there was no need for a trial anymore because he was already pleading guilty, which means none of those survivors had their chance to finally speak out against him. They also never got to explain how the church mishandled everything. And honestly, without this reporting, odds are we would not be hearing their stories at all, because the pastor didn't want their stories to be told. And by the nature of the legal system, their stories were not going to be told in a public way. Now, some of the survivors have since filed lawsuits against Massey and the church and the overall Old Apostolic Lutheran Church of America. But that doesn't prevent the church from downplaying the seriousness of what happened. Like, there's no indication they're going to change their ways to prevent this kind of abuse in the future. So if you take any lesson from this story, it's that these situations are never just about one predator. It's about the entire religious system designed to protect them. And it shows how forgiveness can be treated as a weapon and used as a shield for the abusers, right? It's a cage for the abused. Like, forgive him, and then you go back in your cage and never speak about this again. The church always wanted forgiveness, forgetting that is something you have to earn. That's why it was never an actual pathway to healing. That's also why mandated reporting is so important, because institutions and pastors and self-anointed moral authorities, they cannot be trusted to police themselves. Especially if they tell you they run a Christian church, you should not assume they are on the moral high ground. Right? Clergy members who bury abuse under reconciliation, they are not offering spiritual care, they are obstructing justice. They would rather protect the institution than the children. And honestly, Bruckelmeyer is complicit in everything that happened here because he knew about it. He wasn't uninformed. Like, he was told repeatedly by police what his obligations were. And instead of doing the responsible thing, he chose silence and secrecy, and he sided with the predator, and that allowed all this abuse to continue. What did Massey say? There might be hundreds of girls. And that's why you got to hold these people accountable. You remember we talked about this sort of law in Washington state that would not only require pastors to be mandated reporters, but it would not give them any exception if they heard about the abuse in the act of confession. But in Minnesota, they have the confession exception. If you learn about it through confession, you could still keep it a secret. And even then, clergy members did not follow the law. At what point can we all agree mandated reporting doesn't work with clergy members because they always treat it as a suggestion and they're never seriously punished for violating it? Like, mandated reporting cannot be optional just because it's inconvenient for you and your church. So without real accountability, this cycle will continue, and the consequences are going to be devastating for the kids who are least able to fight back. So I encourage you to read the ProPublica and Minnesota Star Tribune article. It's a tough thing to read, but it is important. And then you should share that with the religious people you know. All right. Going to stop there. What questions we got here? Yeah, that's the right reaction to all of this. Pastors should be locked up too for enabling. I mean, I don't know what the law says about that, but it's hard to imagine anything differently, right? Like, why isn't that happening? Why doesn't he face any kind of punishment for what he has done? Thanks for that donation. Just made a video on my shorts about mandated reporting being a problem. Dean Euler's story is incredible. Cool. Go check out that short if we could find it up there. And Den will share the link if we need that. To be fair, I don't think our justice system addresses these cases ideally, but not addressing them is just wrong. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Like, I know plenty of people have problems with the cops and the way we police in this country anyway, legit criticisms. But in this case, the police seem to have their hands tied behind their backs because they couldn't do much under the law. They couldn't do much if victims were not willing to speak out about it. They can't press charges. And the people who are in a position to do so, like the pastor, decided, no, I'm just going to stay shut. I care about the abuser more than the abused. You can forgive a person with the compulsive behavior, but they're going to keep doing it. I mean, that's the thing. Like I said, forgiveness has to be earned. And the people here were not interested in anyone earning forgiveness because Massey just kept doing what he did. Forgiveness is an action. Yeah, well said. And they didn't do any action. I wonder why women are leaving their churches, but men are more religious than ever. Isn't that a scary thing? Especially like young conservative men are flocking to churches because I know like there they get treated like kings. They run their families. And that's a scary change that is happening. If you ever listen to Theo Bros online, they very much are like, mask off. We want patriarchy. Women shouldn't have the right to vote. They shouldn't be allowed to hold public office. And this is the way God wants it. It's a scary place to be on the internet. This kind of dovetails with the Riley Gaines story this week. Yeah, I don't know if you saw that. I forgot where that was published. Was that The Nation? But basically, someone did a whole story on the anti-trans bigot, Riley Gaines, who famously placed fifth in a college swim meet, tying with Leah Thomas, who is a trans swimmer. And she used that as a starting point to basically become a spokesperson for anti-trans bigotry. But the big thing that you learn in that piece that I did not know before I read it is that why is Riley Gaines going anti-trans? Yes, she wants to protect women's sports and stuff, but really, it's about they spend so much time talking about how trans swimmers, they have to change in the same locker rooms as us, and it's predatory, and isn't that awful, and we have to stop that. Meanwhile, Riley Gaines' coach at college where she was that swimmer, was he charged with being a sexual predator? I don't remember her speaking about him against him at all. And in her book that came out recently, she praises him nonstop. So if she actually cares about predatory behavior and abuse, there was an obvious person she could have gone against who was the cisgender straight dude who was her coach. But instead, she's going after the fictional boogeyman of a trans swimmer who she competed against. Yep, they're all aiming in the wrong direction because they just want to, they don't actually care about any of this stuff. All right, let me jump to a different article. 1 second. Okay. Let's talk about what's happening in Alabama right now, because I would argue that of all the issues going on with Christian nationalism and church state separation, the number one issue that is a problem when it comes to the mingling of religion and politics right now is the number of states that are using taxpayer money that should be going to public schools, and they're using that money to prop up religious indoctrination. It is happening more and more, and a lot of states, red states specifically, are throwing hundreds of millions of dollars in the direction of religious indoctrination. So the way it works in Alabama, for example, check this out. This is what they did last year in 2024. Alabama legislature gives final approval to school voucher-like program. The Choose Act would give up to $7,000 in tax credits for use on non-public education, including private school tuition. So they passed this bill that basically says we will give you thousands of dollars to help you pay for private schools or private tutoring or educational material. So you could get $2,000 if you were homeschooling your kids. And at the time, they said initially we're limiting the program for couples making $75,000 a year if you have one kid. But like by 2026, it's going to be open to more people. And the legislature is projected to spend over $100 million a year on this program starting next year. And the other thing you should know about how popular this is in Alabama is that more than 36,000 students applied for 14,000 vouchers in that program. That was earlier this year. So a lot of people want to take advantage of the taxpayer dollars that the state is giving away so they can attend private schools. And the thing about private schools is that most private schools are religious schools, and most religious schools are Christian schools. So they want to take taxpayer dollars to pay for tuition at private Christian schools or Catholic schools or what have you. And one of the criticisms of vouchers is most of the people taking advantage of this are people who already could afford to go to those schools. But why pay for it if the state's going to throw your money your way, right? And it's not just Alabama. This is happening in a lot of states. And this is one of the biggest concerns about school choice, which is that it's a fancy term for spending taxpayer dollars to fund religious indoctrination. But here's why I'm bringing this up right now. That program has now been going on long enough in Alabama that we now have a sense of where that money is being spent. Because if you're spending it for homeschooling curricular materials, or you're spending it at a private religious school, we can ask a couple questions. Well, what textbooks are you buying? If you go to a private religious school, what's the curriculum that the private religious school is using, and what books do they use in the classroom? And this is the thing I wanted to point out to you, because this is the headline that was in AL.com recently. In Alabama, public money buys textbooks that downplay slavery and call rock music rebellion. Honestly, I don't even know if that's the whole headline, or it should be, because those are not the biggest concerns here. But look at this. This is from reporter Rebecca Griesbach. Look at this. Many providers that receive taxpayer dollars, AL.com found, sell or use materials that downplay slavery, teach that humans lived among dinosaurs, and state that rock music and mental health issues are signs of rebellion. AL.com reviewed curricula from nearly 300 schools and verified homeschool vendors. Of the 184 private schools that publish their curricula online, nearly half, at least 79, use materials that have been flagged by experts for a lack of depth and rigor. Oh my goodness. So, these private Christian schools are using textbooks that are well known for keeping kids uneducated. Like the vendors include, oh, I can point this out here. Let me see if I can pull this up. I'll grab it. They are using books written by A. Becca, Bob Jones University, and the Association of Christian Schools International. And what is in those books? Check this out right here. In an A. Becca history textbook, authors write that slaves seem to be better investments than indentured servants, and claim that freedmen promoted fiscal irresponsibility during Reconstruction. Jesus. Authors also blame the decline of Americans' views on race relations on the nation's first black president. Yes, that Obama, he made racism worse. Another popular provider, Bob Jones University, and it will never not be funny that a fundamentalist Christian school is BJU. They stress abstinence and encourage students to reject same-sex marriage in its health curricula. Contemporary culture emphasizes the importance of love with slogans like "Love wins," a BJU teacher's guide reads. But this slogan twists the virtue of love by disconnecting it from scripture, using it to promote the LGBTQ agenda. This is in a textbook for children. So not only is all of this very bad, when researchers looked into these books just a couple of years ago, there's a really fascinating article here. Sounds fancy, but just look at the title. Evolutionary Stasis, Creationism, Evolution, and Climate Change in the Accelerated Christian Education Curriculum. And the ACE curriculum is another one of those, A. Becca, BJU. ACE is another one that's also bad. Basically, what they found is that there was evidence of climate denial. There was a false claim that certain scientists made their discoveries only because God helped them. There were passages encouraging students to memorize what God made on each day of creation as if that's a fact. Like the practice, it was also funny to me because there were questions at the back of the chapters in some of these Christian books. And you remember textbooks from school, they would like, hey, review. Who was the legislator who did this, right? But one of the questions in one textbook said the word deck, D-E-C-K. What does deck mean? A, an angry elephant, or B, a floor of a boat? Like the wrong answer isn't even close. It's just 100% wrong. How are you learning anything from a question like that? So what happens, you might be wondering, what happens if you use your voucher money on a regular science textbook? Well, apparently that's not a safe bet either, and I forgot about this. In Alabama, guess what happens in their science textbooks? The Alabama Board of Education plans to make some changes to its science course of study, but has no plans to remove a textbook insert used since 1995 that calls evolution a controversial theory. That is that's a disclaimer that's in Alabama science books, and I had forgotten that's a thing, but it is still a thing, and that's for a regular science book. So, in any case, what is going on right now is that students are being taught to use these textbooks that are anti-science, anti-history. It's all propaganda. And what happens when you use those books? Well, if you ask people who are fundamentalist Christians who grew up in that environment, let's say they're older. Let's say they go to college. Let's say they went to a Christian college, but now they live in the real world. And they realize, oh shit, I don't actually know anything. Like maybe they go to a public university somehow after years of being homeschooled, or they go to a private Christian school and they're taking like a basic biology class, and everyone around them knows a lot more than they do because they were never prepared for that stuff. That's the danger here. Look at what one student said who used some of these books when she was younger. It's straight up propaganda, said Amy Georgievich, who learned from 2 of the 3 textbooks as a homeschooler and at a Birmingham area private school. When she went to college, she said she confronted the amount of information she had to catch up on. The biggest surprise to me was taking history and science classes and just thinking I have been lied to. And that just adds to the mental load because you're having to relearn it all over again. Or if I may correct her, Learn it for the first time because you didn't learn it accurately back then either. And as she says in the article, it's not that you learn nothing in those Christian textbooks. It's that the religious education you get from a lot of those books, it's built on memorizing stuff. It's based on regurgitating information. There's no critical thinking. They don't teach kids how to analyze things because critical thinking goes against everything religion stands for. If you learn how to think critically, you might ask questions about the Bible. They can't have that happen. If you thought about this stuff long enough, none of it makes any sense. And it's not just in science either. There is a curriculum called Saxon Math. It's very popular in the homeschooling Christian world. And the focus there is on algorithms and examples, right? What they don't do in Saxon Math is teach you like number sense. How do you manipulate numbers? What are you actually doing when you're dividing a 3-digit number by a 2-digit number? Like, yes, you can do an algorithm. You can get the right answer. But at some point, the problems are going to get harder, right? And if you don't know how to do the basics, not the algorithm, but if you don't actually understand what you're doing, it's going to make it a lot harder. Now, I've said this before. I taught math for a number of years. There are kids who, the kids who are good at math are the ones who understand how numbers work and they know how to manipulate numbers. And when they learn something new, they just build on what they already know. But if you're someone who just sat there and memorized the quadratic formula, which a lot of us did, like you might get a quadratic equation problem correct, but when I start manipulating it and I start asking you to do more than plug and chug, you're screwed because you don't actually know what any of these variables stand for. You don't actually know what the numbers are doing. So remember years ago, there was a lot of controversy surrounding Common Core. They were changing how they taught certain classes, the expectations in certain curriculum. They were changing. Part of the controversy was that when you're teaching math, they really want to teach kids how to manipulate numbers, how to think about numbers. And sure, that means going slower at first. It's not just about getting the right answer. It's about knowing the right process. Why? Because if you know the process, you're going to be able to do better in higher level math classes later in life. And some conservatives are like, what? Just subtract it. Carry the 1. You're done. You get the right answer. You're slow. Why are you teaching my kids to be slow? And it's like, because if they learn what you learn, they can't actually do tougher problems. That's what Saxon Math does. And the reason it's a problem is because that's the sort of math they're learning in these homeschooling curriculums. And it's not just me saying this. Check out this from an investigation. Sorry to go on my little math rant there. A 2018 Orlando Sentinel investigation into Abeka, BJU Press, and Accelerated Christian Education found that the texts focus on simple reading passages, basic math, and repetitive activities such as copying sentences with little to demand students think critically. A 2013 study found that among students from similar social and economic backgrounds, public school students tested higher in math than their peers in private schools. They also found that several private schools were using outdated math curricula, like the one I just told you about, including many of the materials currently used by Alabama private schools. So the problem here is that some of these companies that are publishing these shitty textbooks, they have been told by Alabama, like, it's totally fine. We will still endorse what you're doing. Check out this one right here. Apologia, a North Carolina-based company that publishes Christian textbooks and online courses, states in its biology curriculum that the Earth is thousands of years old rather than millions of years old. In a zoology textbook, authors claim dinosaurs came into existence on the 6th day of creation and suggest that they lived among humans. As the joke goes, they treat the Flintstones like it's a documentary. And it's not just that either. Even if a Christian curriculum is rigorous, it's often deficient or worse in other ways. Like there was one founder that I want to show you about. She decided to just start up her own textbook company. Here we go. Look at this one. Former public school teacher Karen Lemons founded Lemons Aid Learning in her Virginia home at the onset of the pandemic. Now she serves just over 3,000 students across the country. And when you name your company Lemon's Aid, things aren't going to go well. There's a common misconception that homeschool curricula lack rigor or aren't evidence-based, she said. In reality, our curriculum is intentionally designed using research-validated and evidence-based practices that prepare students for success in higher education and careers. But the school says all coursework is aligned with the Master's Seminary, a conservative doctrine that rejects homosexuality and the theory of evolution. Some lessons also take a firm stance on humanistic political theory, such as Marxism, which, one description reads, short-circuit God's design and result in human suffering. Like, oh, so even the lady who's like, I did research, mine is solid, even she's a nutball. So all of that is to say, Alabama is already making a huge mistake by sending taxpayer dollars and allowing them to be used for private religious schools. But now they're compounding that mistake by not having any kind of serious oversight into the curricular choices made by the schools receiving this money, or the textbook companies that the money can be spent on. And that means a lot of people in Alabama are going to be wasting their voucher money on schools or textbooks that are not preparing their kids for any kind of academic success outside of their bubble. And look, I know a lot of those parents never want their kids to leave their bubble. They don't want their kids to go to a public school or outside of it. But guess what? The reality is a lot of those kids are going to escape the bubble at some point. They're either going to get a secular job, or they're going to marry someone who's not quite religious, or they're going to move to an area where there are not as many Christians in the community. At some point, they're going to face reality. And every time that happens, you will see a story about some Christian who grew up with those types of textbooks who are like, oh shit, I didn't learn anything. There's a really wonderful story in the Washington Post a few years ago where a homeschooling fundamentalist Christian couple, both of them grew up in those circles. They got married. They had kids. They were thinking they were going to homeschool their kids as well, but they moved to a different community and they heard the public schools were good and they were worried, but they sent their kids to a public school and they realized very quickly the public school is really nice and the teacher's lovely and they're not indoctrinating the kids against Christianity at all. And they had to grapple with, wait, is everything we were told about public schools a lie? And why is our daughter doing really well? It's like, yeah, that story happens all the time. And none of this is an accident. It's not like this is a glitch that everyone just noticed now and the program is otherwise flawless. This is part of the design. This is why conservatives want vouchers. They want to take away public money that could be boosting public schools and send them to private religious pipelines where there's little to no accountability and expertise is optional and indoctrination is treated like education. The Choose Act is not empowering families, it's subsidizing their ignorance. And the state is now rewarding companies that actively miseducate children, largely because they have a Christian focus that they refuse to get off of, all while making it harder for public schools to educate students in the area. And the worst part is that there are kids caught up in this, and they're the ones who are going to suffer, right? They're collateral damage for this right-wing experiment, and they will graduate thinking they were educated, and they will not realize until it's far too late. Nope, you never actually learned anything you were supposed to learn, and now you're the dumbest one in any room you walk into. Sorry, the rest of us knew better. They are preparing their kids for a world that doesn't exist except in their own fictional Christian bubble. And if those kids ever try to get a job in the secular world or go to a secular college, they will realize how ill-prepared they are, all because Republicans handed their futures to anyone who could cite a Bible verse. So they're sabotaging these kids, these Republicans. Okay, I will pause there. Any questions here? There needs to be certain expectations for homeschool content, not just be able to read. Oh, I like that you think being able to read is an expectation, but that's the whole thing. And all these Christian homeschooling organizations, they want as little oversight as possible, and they get pissed off when states ask homeschooling parents to do the bare minimum just to make sure that kids are learning something. Like, they don't want any oversight because they want parents to be able to indoctrinate their kids the way they want to. And if there's abuse going on, whatever, we want to make it as hard as possible for anyone to find out. All right, I'm going to jump to one last story. Give me a second here. I have no clue. If you were going to say 7 and that was some Christian reference, I would have been pissed. All right. Last story for you here. Not that long ago, Oklahoma was about to be the home of the nation's first ever taxpayer-funded religious charter school. And you may remember that was a big story at the time. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because it's happening all over again. So let me go back a little bit and give you some background here. Years ago, the Republicans on the Oklahoma statewide charter school board gave a stamp of approval to the St. Isidore of Seville Catholic Virtual School. And unlike public schools, even though a charter school is a public school, unlike other public schools, St. Isidore of Seville would not have required teachers to be certified. They would not have to accept openly LGBTQ teachers. They would explicitly promote Catholic doctrine during school hours. And there was always the possibility that students who became pregnant, and visibly so, they could be expelled along with trans students just for the crime of existing. And that sex education would just not be part of the curriculum at all. And by the way, that type of school would also not have the sort of resources to take on special ed students. So it very much was not a public school, but they wanted taxpayer dollars to fund that sort of religious school. Like, it wasn't a charter school that happened to be Catholic. It was a Catholic school that pretended to be a charter school so they could get public funding for it. And it was given a green light to open with the backing of Ryan Walters, who is the Christian nationalist, who is the former Oklahoma superintendent of public instruction. And there was a lawsuit involved. And this is amazing. The Oklahoma State Supreme Court, look at what they said in their conclusion when this case got to them. Under Oklahoma law, a charter school is a public school. As such, a charter school must be non-sectarian. However, St. Isidore will evangelize the Catholic faith as part of its school curriculum while sponsored by the state. This state's establishment of a religious charter school violates Oklahoma statutes, the Oklahoma Constitution, and the Establishment Clause. ... The court grants the relief sought by the state. The St. Isidore contract violates state and federal law and is unconstitutional. So they voted 7-1 to repeal the charter school grant to this school. They said this school cannot receive taxpayer dollars. That would go against the state constitution, the federal constitution. Absolutely not. And they were right. That's amazing, coming from the Oklahoma Supreme Court. And then religious zealots appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, thinking, well, we have friends over there. They're going to be on our side, right? And what happened when it reached the U.S. Supreme Court? Well, this is what happened like last year, or actually earlier this year. In an unsigned one-sentence order, the justices indicated that with Justice Amy Coney Barrett recused from the case because she knew someone who was involved in the drafting of all this, they had divided 4-4. The order did not indicate how any of the justices voted. That tie means the state Supreme Court's opinion remains good law, although it is binding only in Oklahoma and does not have nationwide effect. So because the U.S. Supreme Court was tied 4-4, the Oklahoma Supreme Court's decision stood, and they said the charter school is unconstitutional. So excellent news all around, even though it's temporary, because maybe a different case gets to the Supreme Court. Amy Coney Barrett does not recuse herself, and now who knows what's going to happen. I mean, we know what would happen, but theoretically, we don't know what's going to happen. So that's the background. That's the background you need to know, because now there is another religious group trying to finish what the people of St. Isidore tried to start. Okay, so earlier this month, the Oklahoma Statewide Charter School Board held their monthly board meeting, and they wanted an update. Like, how many schools are applying to become charter schools? What's the update? And I want to play for you this clip. It's not an exciting clip per se, but here's one of their people explaining, here's how many schools applied.
Okay, so moving on to 8B, as Chairman Sheldon said, regarding potential charter school and virtual charter school applications for initial authorization. Just want to kind of give you an update on what we've received over the last few months. Year to date, we have received letters of intent from 8 potential applicants. 3 intent letters are to open virtual charter schools. One is a classic liberal arts school, another college and career prep school, which would have an educational management organization, and then also a virtual religious charter high school.
Like, wait, what? A virtual religious charter high school? What more can you tell us? And it didn't take long for the details to come out. This is from the Oklahoma Voice, fantastic independent outlet. Leading the latest effort is the National Ben Gamla Jewish Charter School Foundation, whose representative, Peter Deutsch, founded 6 non-religious Hebrew English charter schools in Florida, known as the Ben Gamla Charter Schools. Deutsch, a former Democratic U.S. representative, submitted a letter of intent on November 3rd to apply for charter authorization with the Oklahoma Statewide Charter School Board. A formal application has not yet been submitted for the school, and the board cannot take a vote until that happens. So they said, we want to open the school, but they haven't actually filled out the paperwork to do so. But they said Ben Gamla envisions Oklahoma students gaining a rigorous, values-based education that integrates general academic excellence with Jewish religious learning and ethical development. That's what they want to do. This, by the way, this is Peter Deutsch. The fact that he's a Democrat who wants to do this tells you a lot about his politics already, but I believe he either lost a race or he retired, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I think, is the Democrat who took his spot, like a very Jewish constituency back in the day. So this guy launched a bunch of secular charter schools for Jewish students in Florida, but now he's in Oklahoma and he wants this to happen there. Okay. And he also said in this article, if I can find it here, he said he plans to submit the Oklahoma application, and it has nothing to do with his secular schools in Florida. He wants this one to be like ultra religious. He added separately that, let me see if I can find this somewhere here. Here we go. This is what he also said to a local media outlet. Ben Gamla envisions Oklahoma students gaining a rigorous values-based education that integrates academic excellence with Jewish religious learning and ethical development. He said the school would deliver Oklahoma's state-approved academic standards alongside Jewish religious studies, enabling students to achieve college readiness while developing deep Jewish knowledge, faith, and values within a supportive learning community. Okay, so that's disturbing. Now, I should tell you, when the Supreme Court was weighing in on the St. Isidore case, Deutsch made clear he looked to that school as a model for what he wanted to do. And let me see if I can pull this up here. Where is the thing I am looking for? Did I lose it already? No, here we go. Takes me a second. Oh, here's the thing I'm looking for. He's been at this for a while. Deutsch originally envisioned his Ben Gamla charter school network as a way to combat the assimilation of American Jews. But his goal proved elusive, partly because church-state separation required the schools to remain fastidiously secular. When Oklahoma approved St. Isidore, Deutsch traveled there, hoping to fulfill his original vision of a publicly funded Jewish school. However, after speaking with rabbis and Jewish parents, he concluded that the state's small Jewish population made the idea impractical. Okay, so he wasn't bothered by the church-state implications of it all. He was only concerned, I don't think we're going to have enough kids to make this work. But on paper, St. Isidore and this Ben Gamla Jewish school, those are the same kinds of schools. The only difference is that if this gets approved and there are lawsuits and it gets to the Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett would not have to recuse herself from this case. That's what this game is all about. That's the only reason they are doing this. In fact, when he talked about this, let me see if I could pull this up. Where did it go? Man, I'm looking for this thing, and it's like suddenly gone as soon as I need it. Here we go. Check this out right here. Deutsch knows all this. He also noted the U.S. Supreme Court's tie vote in the St. Isidore case, from which Justice Amy Coney Barrett recused herself, calling the debate over religious charter schools an unanswered question. I work under the assumption today that religious charter schools are legal, and eventually we'll have a decision to validate the law as I see it today, which is a weird way of saying the Supreme Court will do exactly what I want eventually. We just got to give him the case that he wants. And in fact, the Oklahoma Voice noted that one of the three founders of the Jewish school, one of the three guys who signed the letter saying, we're curious about opening a charter school in Oklahoma, one of them is a guy named Brett Farley, who was also a board member for St. Isidore. And I'm fascinated by this Brett Farley guy because apparently this guy has no religious affiliation whatsoever, or he's so committed to the conservative goal that taxpayer dollars should fund religious indoctrination that he doesn't care which religion does it, he's on board. So the plan for the new school is to open in the fall of 2026 if they get approval. And while there is no formal application yet, and even though the school charter school board has not voted to approve it, the Attorney General is already chiming in on this. The Attorney General, Gentner Drummond of Oklahoma, is a Republican, but he's also weirdly a strong defender of church-state separation, and he's the guy who fought against St. Isidore. This is what he said in response to all this. Attorney General Gentner Drummond led the legal fight against St. Isidore, contending it would eviscerate constitutional church-state separation. His office said this: this matter has already been resolved after the state Supreme Court's ruling to prevent taxpayer-funded religious charter schools was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court earlier this year. Our office will oppose any attempts to undermine the rule of law. So if the charter school board says yes to the Jewish school, Oklahoma's Attorney General is going to go after it. But again, that's part of the plan. That's part of the game here, because the Jewish school is only being launched here, not because there's a huge Jewish population that wants it in Oklahoma, but because they want to use it as a test case to get in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, hoping that the religious conservative supermajority will just say yes and then open the floodgates to taxpayer-funded religious schools everywhere. And they're using Jewish school instead of a Catholic school because I think they're like a Christian school would be way too on point for the game we're trying to play here. Now, despite all that, Americans United for Separation of Church and State, they are already trying to send out warning signals against this. This is what they said in a statement. Despite their loss earlier this year at the U.S. Supreme Court, religious extremists, once again, are trying to undermine our country's promise of church-state separation by forcing Oklahoma taxpayers to fund a religious public school. Not on our watch. And they've actually sent a formal letter to the Oklahoma statewide charter school board, basically saying, we want all your communication about this school. We want all the information, the letter of intent. Basically, we want all the records involved in this school, just in case we need to build a legal case when we come after you. Right? By the way, I forgot to mention this. Our friend here, Peter Deutsch, who is this guy who is behind all this? He's a Democrat. Well, guess what? In 2024, look at the date on this. October of 2024, former Representative Peter Deutsch, who represented Florida's 20th Congressional District from 93 to 05, he announced his support for Donald Trump on a call organized by the Trump campaign to mark the anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel. I feel very comfortable today publicly announcing that I'm endorsing Donald Trump to be reelected as president, Deutsch said, adding he intends to vote for Trump on election day. That's the guy we're talking about here. He said he was basing that decision on Trump's supposed commitment to immigration policy, school choice, and I shit you not, world peace. All of which is to say, this guy does not have a reputation for clear-headed thinking. He's an idiot, and he's an idiot who very much wants to cozy up to conservatives. So this plan, it needs to be stopped in its tracks. The easiest way for that to happen is for the charter school board to just reject that application because it goes against what the charter schools are meant to be. I mean, they're trying to turn public education into a taxpayer-funded battleground for religious indoctrination. All they're trying to do is exploit a loophole by taking public money and spending it through charter schools on religious education. And that means none of those schools would have the obligations public schools do for inclusivity, non-discrimination, professional standards, and a curriculum grounded in fact instead of dogma. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about Catholic dogma or Jewish dogma, whatever. This isn't about school choice either. It is an attempt to dismantle the wall between church and state. And the fact that it's happening in Oklahoma is not a coincidence. That's just the strategy, because the conservative bent of the state makes it more likely to say yes to these types of grifts. And if one group succeeds, you can bet every religious institution in the country will line up to follow suit, ready to decimate public education in order to boost a patchwork of free religious schools for anyone who wants them. And once that door is opened, it will be next to impossible to close it. And that doesn't mean we have a richer educational landscape. It just means we have a broken system where public dollars are funding private belief. Like, Oklahoma's been down this road before. And because of the state's attorney general, and because of Amy Coney Barrett and the U.S. Supreme Court, they all avoided making a terrible mistake. But the U.S. Supreme Court is a threat that is not going to go away. So you cannot let this case get up there. You have to stop it now before it becomes an issue. And by the way, Drummond is not going to be the attorney general for much longer. He's running to become the governor of the state. But even if he's governor, he won't get to stop this. And the next attorney general may be more MAGA influenced. So they got to stop this now without hesitation. They need to do it decisively before the damage is done. I will stop there. Any questions here? Otherwise, that's it. To be frank, Jews tend to be pretty chill. My issue on this: what will this look like and how will it pan out with the Zionism going on? I don't know how politically this would shape out, but it seems very clear that this guy basically wants to educate, basically do what a yeshiva does. They want to educate them in Jewish folklore and Jewish religious beliefs, not just Jewish history or something, which might be acceptable at a charter school. I don't know what the political bent of this place would be, but very much they want to teach these kids religious Judaism. And even though Jews as a whole tend to be pretty secular and chill about this stuff, there are plenty of Jewish people who are very much not secular Jews who would love the chance to send their kids to a publicly funded Jewish school. I forbid you from watching football, friendly atheist. How dare you? Give me some joy today and watch people pummel themselves at each other. I don't actually care. I have no team that I'm caring to watch. I just need something to distract me from all the things. All right, we are good. Thank you so much if you joined me for any of this today. I know it's Thanksgiving afternoon. I will be back next Thursday night at the usual time. Thank you to Den for helping out today of all days. Remember, you can go to patreon.com/Hemant and support this channel. You can all support the newsletter and subscribe to it for free. Do that. Have a wonderful, safe Thanksgiving. I will see you next week. Thanks, everybody.